Hello, AP Scholars. I am going to be showing you the answers and talk a little bit about the 2020 sample exam that came out at the end of last week. It was a bit of a last minute surprise that this showed up, so I think we should definitely go through it because it's the um, most accurate example of what you're going to experience on the AP exam for 2020 since it was written just this month. So we'll go through the questions. We're going to start with question one, and I think you'll see that it's pretty much what we've been practicing for and preparing for, with the exception of question C, which is a new question type. So we'll definitely focus hard on question C. So make sure that you do read through all of the details of this example question. There are some useful bits of information, and much of that will be similar to what you will see on your actual AP exam. So we're going to start with the first question. Notice that you'd have 25 minutes to answer this question, including reading the question and writing your answer, and then 5 minutes to submit your answer. So if you wanted to, you could do this as a test of time to see how long it takes you. But in general, I think you should definitely be able to try to get this timing for this question down. So what they do is they show you something called a gizmo, which is a word for a gadget or some kind of device that you might buy or create, and it has some pretty straightforward stuff. It has a um, a couple of methods for things like it gets a getter for getting its maker, a Boolean method to see if it is an electronic gizmo or not, and it has an equals method. And it says that this is only a partial definition of the class, so we're not too sure what else it contains. But this is all the public stuff, and basically all you need to know to interact with the Gizmo class. So that's the beginning of that. And we go into the next page, we see there's a new class called the Online Purchase Manager. And basically it has an array list of gizmos. Hey, this looks pretty similar, right, to what we've been practicing? So many of these questions are, here is a class, here is an array list or an array of this type of objects from the previously defined class. It has a couple of methods that you're going to be implementing. One is count electronics by maker, and basically that's you're gonna send a string, and it's gonna count how many of the gizmos in this array list are both electronic and made by a particular maker. And of course, that's going to harken back to the get maker method that gizmos have and the is electronic method. So that's that. And in part B, you're going to be writing the has adjacent equal pair. So this will return true if in this list of this list called purchases, if any of the gizmos in back-to-back indices are equal. And there's an equals method that's defined here. I see that it has object as its parameter, but don't let that scare you. I think it's a little bit weird because we didn't really go into that because superclass and hierarchies and that kind of stuff was not part of this year's exam, so I think it's a little bit of a mistake to have put the object class in here. But basically, it can be sent anything, so just send it another gizmo and it'll be fine. Okay, so that's a fair bit of work. There's also question C, which we'll talk about separately. So we'll take a look at the answers to part A and part B. So I'll show you part A first. Hope this is big enough. So we have, first of all, this is already given to us. It's going to return an int, which is the number of um, gizmos in our list called purchases that are electronic and have this maker based on the parameter maker. So this is kind of not too far off from any kind of our list processing questions or coding back questions. Pretty straightforward, to be honest. I'm using here first of all a variable called count to keep track of how many I find. And at the end I return count. Right? Right? This is familiar. I'm using a for each loop here because there's no indices required. We're just going to look at each and every gizmo in the purchases list, and we're just going to check it against some things. So that's why I'm doing it this way. I say my for each loop here. So for each gizmo named G in the purchases list, I'll check first if G is electronic, and I'll also check to see if G.getMaker equals maker. Wow, that's pretty straightforward, I'd say. So basically, we are using the get maker method, and we're comparing it to the string. That's going to be true, return true or false. If that's true, we just increment count by one, and that's it. That's the whole question. That actually was pretty easy. So yeah, I mean, I hope that feels that way. I don't mean to say easy if you're like, oh no, this was hard for me. But I mean, there's not a lot of code to write, and it's quite similar to what we've been doing all year. So I'm happy with that question. I'm excited. If you got that question on the exam, I'd feel like it was a pretty fair question. Here we're gonna go on to the next one. That is part B. That's the one where it has checking to see if there's an adjacent equal pair. So in this one, we're going to be using the equals method of the gizmo class, and yeah, I'll just move down part C a bit. Good enough. So in this one, this again is returning true or false. So if we ever find an adjacent pair, notice that it's not like how many adjacent pairs, it's is there or is there not an example of an adjacent pair. So as soon as we find that, I will immediately return true. It's like, hey, I found evidence. I don't care if there's more adjacent pairs down the road. I just need to know if there's at least one adjacent pair. So that's equal. So I mean, I guess there's lots of adjacent pairs, but are they equal or not? It's the important thing. So I'll return true if I find that. And if I get to the end of this loop, well, I guess I return false because I found no evidence. So the only thing I can do is return false. I will mention that I'm using a for loop here, and I know there's a little bit of concern about for each loops versus for loops. So the reason why I am not using a for each loop here and using the regular good old for loop is because I need to look at adjacent pairs, which means I need to know the index. I need to be able to look at the current thing that the current gizmo that is at index I, and then I need to know the next one beside it. So that's the story. So that's why you have to use a for loop. I guess technically you use a while loop, but you could not use a for each loop because you need to look at two separate things, two separate gizmos at separate indices. So I'm starting my I at 1, and I'm going to keep on going as long as purchases is less than signs. You might say, oh, but Mr. Pelche, what about if the list is like 0 long? That's okay, because if it's got a 0 length, then this will immediately fail, and we'll never go into this loop anyways. So I'm just going to start at 1. Why am I starting at 1? Well, I want to look at adjacent pairs, right? So I'll start at 1, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that item, and then check to see if it's equal to the item at the previous index. So, at the beginning, I will be 1, so this will get me technically the second one in, index 1. This one will get me in the gizmo at index 0, the very first thing. So we're comparing the second to the first. And if they're equal, well, I return true. And of course, after that, I'll increment, and so this will be index 2 compared to index 1 gizmo, and so on. We'll keep on going until we get to the very end. And then in which case, if we do get to the end and we haven't returned true yet, we'll return false. So that's that question. Again, this is not too different than your typical kind of array or array list parsing question where we would just search, and this is the array searcher, I guess, or list searcher type of question. So reasonably straightforward again. So that's great. I think this is the kind of questions you're going to get on the AP exam. You're ready for this. This is the stuff you've been practicing, some of you all the way back to the bullet hell project in grade 10. So woohoo. So let's take a look now at the next question. That's going to be, this is the big curveball. This is the one that we haven't been preparing for exactly. I'm gonna scroll down to, where is this it here? Yeah, this is gonna be a sentence or point form type of question where you're going to be asked to describe stuff with words and not code exactly. So let's take a look and read through this in great detail. I'd like to go over this. This could take maybe even 10 minutes. I'm not too sure. But time well spent, right? We should really figure out this type of question because you will have, surprise, a question just like this. Before I go any further, I'm not exactly sure why the AP exam has suddenly decided to add this question to it. I can only, I don't know. Maybe it's because they're trying to make up for the multiple choice section being cut. I suspect maybe it has something to do with the checking to see if people are cheating because code might be similar, might not be similar, but sentences really shouldn't be similar. So, I'm guessing it's something to do with that cheating check. So, you know, either way, we have this new question type, so let's just figure it out and make it a strength as opposed to a weakness. There's going to be some people that crash and burn on this that are not as prepared for it, but we are very prepared. And we're going to take a look at this question and really understand it. And if you don't understand it or how to answer this type of question, please be sure to contact me and ask me more questions. I'd love to get into it more. No one's really super expert at this because, they have exactly one example to show us how this works. And yeah, no one's ever done it before. So, whatever. We'll just take a look, and I think it's not too bad. So, first of all, I will read the question right now. So, it says a programmer would like to add a method. This is it here get cheapest gizmo by maker, which returns the least expensive gizmo purchased by an individual from a given maker. So, we can assume that this is going to go into the class online purchase manager. Okay. And let's continue on now. So, write a description of how you would change the gizmo and online purchaser classes. So these are changes that can happen to both classes in order to support this modification. Okay, so be sure to include the following in your response. So first, here's the nice part. This is just code. So this is write the method header for the get cheapest gizmo by maker. Okay, cool. The next question is going to be an identify question, or the next aspect of this question is an identify type of question. And the second part is a describe part of the question. And we can expect to have similar types of things, or at least we think we can. So here it is identify any new or modified variables, constants. Constants, by the way, are just final variables, constructors, or methods aside from get cheapest gizmo by maker method. And do not write the code for this change. So when they're not looking for code, they're looking for a description. They're looking for sentences or point form. Words, basically, but not code. Not code. The next question is describe for each new or revised variable, constant, constructor, or method how it would change or be implemented, including visibility. So visibility means public versus private, and type, which means, int or string, whatever the type is. So that's if they're talking about a variable, that's fine. A method, that probably is return type. So you do not need to describe the actual get cheapest gizmo by maker method. So that's a big trap I think some people will fall for. You might be rushing with, minutes to spare, literally minutes to spare. I wouldn't be surprised if even the strongest AP scholars will be like, scrambling for time to, at the very end of this question, to jam this together. So just be aware that in this question, we weren't actually asked to describe much about this. It's the changes we're going to make to the rest of the code that will support this method. In some ways, you kind of have to know how this method's going to work in order to do that, but you're not going to tell anybody about the get cheapest gizmo by maker method. You're going to focus on talking about the changes you're going to make to everything else. Okay, so here's my answer. So we'll start with, write the method header. So here's what I came up with. Public gizmo get cheapest gizmo by maker string maker. So I chose public because it is a method that looks like it would be accessible outside of this class. So some kind of a accessor method, right? It sounds pretty much like an access method. It's getting a gizmo, so seems good. Oh dear, oh I'm yawning. I need to do these videos earlier in the day. uh, and let's see. So I guess I know it's a gizmo because it returns the least expensive gizmo. So there's the thing that the dead giveaway that you have to return a gizmo from a given maker. So it says a given maker. We already know makers are stored as strings. They're just names of companies. So we're gonna make that our parameter. So there you go. Boom. I hope I got my 1 mark. I mean, I did. I mean, I'm sure that's right. So here's my additional stuff here. Let's kind of go over it. So just to start off with, I'm having a private double instance variable called price to the gizmo class that will hold the gizmo's price. So here I'm talking about the visibility and type of this new variable, and I'm using a very specific words like instance variable as opposed to just variable. An instance variable is very much different, right? It's a variable that every object of this class will come with. So I think it's important to use those descriptive words as best we can. So it's called price, and we're putting in the gizmo class because, gizmos. If we're gonna return the least expensive gizmo, we have to record how expensive they are somewhere, and that's got to be in the gizmo class. I also use private because that's how we should make our instance variables. We should make them private because that's one of the core aspects of object-oriented programming. We want to protect that data. We don't want things to be able, outside of this class, to be able to alter or manipulate that data. So we'll make it private. So it must be only controlled within the class by things like the constructor or some mutator methods. Okay, so that's the start. If I do that, though, I guess it's private, so I need to make some kind of accessor method. So that's the next thing I'm going to mention is to add an accessor method. And notice it's public because it's an accessor method. It returns double because the instance variable is a double, and then I just call it get price because that's the most basic name I can think of, and it returns the gizmo's price. So this is pretty important because otherwise, the what's the other class called? Ugh. The the manager class. What is it called? Oh, gosh, here it is. The online purchase manager class. If it wasn't public, then that other class, which is client code, wouldn't be able to access it. So there you go. So I guess I also have to make some changes to the constructor, and it even tells us we should talk about the constructor, so that's great. So I'm modifying the constructor for Gizmo so that it can take a parameter the to set the price, because otherwise I should move this up. I'm not sure if my little overlay is covering it. I hope that didn't suck. Whatever. I guess we'll keep going. So yeah, we got to add in that constructor. Otherwise, how will we ever set the price, right? Makes sense to change the constructor. And yeah, it's just for setting the value of the gizmo's price. And I threw this in here. I don't know. I don't know if this was necessary, but maybe you can make a mutator method that looks like this. That's just for setting the price. So I don't know. Just throwing that in there. And you know what? That answers the question. It didn't really get into get cheapest gizmo by maker at all. Just how are we gonna make everything else change so that we can make this work? So there you go. That's the answer. Of course, no official answer key has been released, so we don't know exactly what answer they're looking for. But I think that covers all the bases. I think that's as good an answer as we can find. And I have consulted with other teachers, other AP teachers. There's like a big message board of AP comp sci teachers worldwide, and generally the consensus is this is the best answer that we can produce. Okay, so there you go. That's what we got to do. I think that's not it's not bad. You know, it's not nice to have a new question type suddenly forced upon us at the last minute, but it was totally doable with the skills that you learned. Things like our fraction class and all of the classes that we wrote, Hangman and so on. Those helped you to develop the vocabulary for doing these types of things. If you're not sure, you might want to go back and look over some of the vocabulary of object-oriented classes on my website, which we haven't used for a while, but we'll just go over to lordbing.net/com. Oh, I missed this place. Teams has taken over, but you can go and take a look at our unit vocabulary list. It might be a good thing, and also like some of our notes to take a look and see, the names of all these different things, and just remind yourself. And guess what? You can have this open or printed, and it could just be there. Hey, someone's here. Who are you, anonymous unicorn? You're awesome that you're actually reading this over and studying right now. But anyways, you can just kind of go through here and take a look at some of these terms, print it out or have it on a separate tab or something ready to go. Might take a look at the notes as well and just see what you want to see about that. So, just have our vocabulary sharp to answer those written questions. So I'm going to stop there because that is a pretty long video as it is. I'm going to come back for another video to show you the answer to question 2 and just talk about question 2. I miss you guys so much. I wish I was in a classroom right now teaching you guys. So I have no idea. Even in the classroom, I have no idea if people are getting it. I usually get a couple nods. Someone out there is like nodding. Someone I can just be like, yeah, that person is like smiling or nodding at me. And that tells me one person gets it, but like there's some confirmation that somebody's getting it. So I don't know if you're getting any of this or if this is useful. Or if you have other questions, please send me email. Comment in Teams would be awesomest because then other people can see it. But whatever, just send me some messages. I'm here to help. That's my goal. Okay. So I'll be back in another video with question 2. Bye, everybody.